Some stories are told, others are buried, and a few are quietly removed. Everything you're about to hear exists in fragments, scattered across letters, private archives, and testimonies that were never meant to surface. None of it has been officially confirmed, but none of it has ever been fully denied either. There are names that appear in records before they should exist, accounts that grow without origin, people who rise too quickly and then vanish without trace. Not dead, just gone. As if the world itself forgot them. Historians will tell you power follows money, influence follows strategy. But what if that's only part of the truth? And what if some of the most powerful families in history didn't build their empires, but inherited something else, something older? This story isn't about what was proven. It's about what keeps appearing again and again, across time, across countries, across generations, without explanation. And if even a fraction of it is real, then some names are not written by choice. They're placed. So before we begin, look around. Make sure you're alone. And if you're drawn to stories like this, the kind that keeps you curious, go ahead and subscribe now. You might not realize it yet, but you're already listening for a reason. Let's begin. London, 1912. Not a year remembered for what was seen, but for what was recorded. I was not meant to find the ledger. Men like me weren't meant to look beyond numbers, beyond ink and paper. I was a clerk, quiet, forgettable, useful only in how little I mattered. My job was simple: record transactions, verify signatures, ensure everything balanced, and it always did. Sachanam, that was the strange part. It always balanced even when it shouldn't have. There were accounts that grew too quickly, names that appeared too suddenly, fortunes that formed without origin. At first, I assumed it was brilliance, strategy, power moving in ways I couldn't understand. But then I noticed something else. Names, repeating. Not in the same context, not in the same ledgers, but present, always present. And then, sometimes, gone, entirely gone. Not crossed out, not archived, just missing, as if they had never existed at all. I began keeping my own notes, quietly in the margins of scraps I hid beneath my desk. I wrote down names before they vanished, compared entries, dates, patterns, and slowly something began to form. A structure, not of finance, but of selection. Certain individuals would rise rapidly, unnaturally, and their influence would expand, their wealth would multiply, and then silence. Their names would stop appearing anywhere. Not in newspapers, not in contracts, not even in personal correspondences. It was as though the world itself had forgotten them. I told myself it was coincidence, that powerful men often disappear quietly, but deep down, something felt wrong. Not coincidence, design. The first time I saw the ledger, I wasn't supposed to be in that room. The vault was restricted, accessible only to senior archivists. But that night, something compelled me. Not curiosity, not ambition, something quieter, heavier, like a thought that wasn't mine. The door was already open when I arrived. Inside, there was no gold, no stacks of currency, just a table, and on it, a single book, bound in red. Not bright, not fresh, but dark, worn, like something that had been held too many times. I remember thinking it looked warm, as if it held heat, as if it was alive. I didn't touch it at first. I stood there staring, waiting for someone to enter and demand an explanation for my presence. But no one came. The silence inside that room felt different from the rest of the building, thicker, pressing in from all sides. When I finally stepped closer, I noticed something strange. The pages were not still, not moving in any obvious way, but shifting, subtly, like the ink itself was adjusting, settling into place. I opened it, slowly, carefully. The first page contained a list of names, dozens of them, each followed by dates, locations, and what appeared to be financial summaries. But the numbers didn't matter. What mattered was the final column. There were only 2 entries that ever appeared there, active or closed. I flipped further, page after page. Names I recognized, men of influence, figures I had seen referenced in countless documents, some marked active, others closed. I turned back to the beginning, scanning the earliest entries, and that's when I saw it. A name I knew didn't belong there, a name that had not yet entered public record, a man who would not rise to prominence for another decade. And yet, here he was, listed, already active. My hands began to shake. I told myself it was a mistake, a printing error, but this book had not been printed. There were no signs of typesetting, no inconsistencies. Every letter was perfectly formed, too perfect, as if written not by hand, but by something that understood writing, without being human. I closed the book quickly, my breath uneven, but as I did, I noticed something else. On the last page, a blank section, no names, just empty space, waiting. And as I stared at it, I had the unmistakable feeling that it was not empty at all, that it was simply unfinished. I left the room without taking anything, without touching anything else, but something had already followed me out. I could feel it, not behind me, not around me, inside me, like a question that had been planted, one I could not ignore. That night, I did not sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the pages, the names, and that final column. Active, closed. It didn't feel like a record. It felt like a process. The next morning, nothing had changed. The office was as it always was. Quiet, ordered, predictable. Men moved through their task without hesitation, without question. But I noticed things I hadn't before. Small things. A colleague pausing mid-sentence, as if he had forgotten what he was about to say. Another man signing his name, then staring at it, confused, as though he didn't recognize it. I began to pay closer attention to everything. Conversations, movements, patterns. And slowly the world began to feel inconsistent. Not wrong, just slightly off, like a reflection that didn't quite match the object it mirrored. That afternoon, I saw a name I had written down the night before. It was in one of the ledgers I was reviewing, active, just as it had been. But when I checked the corresponding files, there was nothing, no records, no history, no trace that the man had ever existed. I asked a senior clerk about it, casually, carefully. He looked at me for a long moment, then shook his head. I said I must be mistaken, that no such account had ever been processed, but I had seen it. I knew I had. I returned to my desk, my thoughts racing, and that's when I noticed it, my own handwriting. In the margin of a document I didn't remember marking, a single line, written in ink I did not recognize. Do not look for what has already been taken. I stared at it, my heart pounding. I hadn't written that. I was certain. And yet it was my handwriting, perfectly matched. That evening, I went back to the vault. The door was closed this time, locked, as it should have been. But as I stood there unsure of what to do, I heard something, a sound from the other side, not movement, not footsteps, something softer, like pages turning, slowly, deliberately. I pressed my ear against the door. The sound stopped, and for a moment there was nothing. And then faintly, a voice, not clear, not understandable, but present, whispering, not to me, but about me. I began to change after that, not visibly, not in ways others would notice, but internally something shifted. Time felt different. Days stretched and folded in ways I couldn't explain. There were moments I could not account for, gaps in my memory where entire hours had vanished, and always the sense that I was being watched. Not constantly, not directly, but enough to know I was not alone. One evening as I prepared to leave, a letter was placed on my desk. No seal, no signature, just my name, written in the same precise hand I had seen in the ledger. Inside there was only one sentence. You are requested. No location, no time. But I understood. Somehow I knew where to go. The address came to me not as a thought, but as a certainty. That night, I traveled across the city to a part of London I had never visited. A large estate, set back from the road, surrounded by iron gates and shadowed trees. The gates were open. No guards, no lights in the windows. And yet, it was not empty. I could feel that immediately. The air itself seemed heavier, charged. I approached the entrance slowly. The door opened before I could knock. Inside there were people, dozens of them, standing, waiting. No one spoke. No one acknowledged my arrival. They were dressed formally, but not uniformly. Each seemed to belong to a different world, a different level of society. And yet, they were all here, together. I stepped inside, the door closing behind me without a sound. The room was dimly lit, candles mostly, their light flickering in a way that made the walls seem to move. But at the center of the room was a table, and on it, the ledger, the same book. I felt it immediately, the same warmth, the same presence. No one approached it, no one touched it. They simply stood, watching, waiting. And then, from the far end of the room, a figure stepped forward. Tall, thin, dressed in a dark coat. His face was obscured by shadow. But I knew without understanding how that he was not like the others. He did not belong to them. He belonged to the book. No one introduced him. No one spoke his name. He simply stood beside the table, his hand resting lightly on the ledger's cover. And then, without looking at anyone in particular, he began to speak. Not loudly, not forcefully, but with a clarity that cut through the silence. He read a name, just one. A man standing near the edge of the room reacted immediately. His body stiffened. His breathing became uneven. He tried to step back, but his legs refused to move. The others did not react. They did not intervene. They simply watched. The man began to tremble. His hands shook violently, his eyes wide with something beyond fear. Recognition. As if he understood, in that moment, something he had always known but never faced. He collapsed to his knees, not suddenly, slowly, as though something inside him was being removed piece by piece. His eyes remained open, but there was nothing behind them. No awareness, no presence, just emptiness. The figure closed the ledger. The man did not move again. No one checked on him. No one acknowledged what had happened. It was as if it had always been expected, as if this was not an event, but a process. I wanted to leave. Every instinct told me to run, to escape, to forget everything I had seen. But I couldn't move. My body felt heavy, anchored in place. And then, slowly, the figure turned his head, not toward the others, toward me. For a moment, I thought he was looking at me, but there was no face, no features. Just the outline of a head, and within it, nothing. And yet I felt seen, completely, as if every thought, every memory, every part of me had been laid bare. He did not speak, but I heard something, not in my ears, in my mind, a single sentence. "You have already been recorded." I don't remember leaving the estate. I don't remember the journey back. The next thing I recall is sitting at my desk, the morning light filtering through the windows as though nothing had happened. But everything had. I could feel it. The world was no longer stable, no longer consistent. I checked the ledgers immediately, my hands moving without conscious thought. And there it was, a new entry. My name, not at the end, not in the middle, somewhere deeper, embedded among others, marked active. The final column was blank, not yet decided. I stared at it for a long time, waiting for it to change, hoping it wouldn't. But the longer I looked, the more I understood. It wasn't a matter of if, it was a matter of when. The days that followed were fragmented, conversations repeated, faces blurred, time slipped, and always the sense that something was approaching, not quickly, not urgently, but inevitably. I stopped trying to make sense of it, stopped asking questions. There were no answers, only patterns. And I was part of one now. I returned to the vault one last time. The door was open again, as if waiting. I entered. My movements slow, deliberate. The ledger was on the table just as before. I approached it, my reflection faintly visible in its dark cover. For a moment I hesitated, then I opened it. My name was still there, but the final column had changed, closed. I felt nothing. No pain, No fear, just a quiet understanding. This had always been the outcome. I closed the book gently, and as I did, I noticed something else. A new blank space at the end, waiting, just like before. Somewhere, someone would find it. Someone would read it. Someone would understand. Too late. And then they would be recorded. Before you go, do not forget to hit the subscribe button.